Welcome to the Politics Guys. I'm Michael Baranowski, a political scientist at Northern Kentucky University. So, Jay, I thought we'd start off this Wednesday episode with a listener comment, actually, and I think it's going to fit in reasonably well with our main topic for today. It's a comment from a listener on our September 2nd show. So here's what he had to write. He said, "Hi, Jay and Mike. I'm writing this from Houston. I'm a longtime listener, and I have a few thoughts on this week's show. As you might imagine, the majority of our city has temporarily put aside political differences as we rebuild and return to normalcy hand in hand. It's been refreshing, and I'm proud of Houston for how we've handled the adversity. My hope is that this togetherness doesn't fade and we remain an example of a strong, unified community. With that in mind, I heard some things in this week's show that bothered me. I've noticed that the amount of divisive, snide comments from Michael towards Jay on his political and cultural viewpoints continues to increase. Perhaps I'm more sensitive to these comments these weeks, but I just don't see how they are helpful. Keep in mind, Michael, that your snide comments toward Jay are also landing with listeners who have similar beliefs and backgrounds. Also, I think your listeners can find that type of poor humor or slander in just about any political medium today. Perhaps you could differentiate your show by incorporating more inclusive, thought-provoking discussions without consistent bias and slander. In this week's show, Mike stated it was great to be exposed to different viewpoints and backgrounds throughout the military, exposure to people who look different and have different views. I think it can be a strength of our country. Agreed. But perhaps you can take it a step further by tolerating diverse opinions, empathizing with various groups, and fostering more inclusive discussions." So that was, I'm sorry if I'm blanking on the listener's name right now. I forgot to include it, but I was sort of taken aback by that, Jay.
Bam.
Yeah, I certainly well, I certainly didn't feel last week or like really much at all that I'm snide or slander or dismissive toward your views. But I recognize that a lot of times people can behave that way and not recognize it. And so I thought I would ask you if that was something you picked up on, because certainly if that's something I'm doing, I'd like to be made aware of it.
Well, I would say no more so than like the last 25 years I've known you. Look, I certainly didn't take anything that you said as being a snide or offensive. And then, for our listeners that don't know, again, Mike and I have known each other for at least 25 years, more than that, I think. And have had these arguments going on for a lot of those times. So we have a certain familiarity with how we can talk to each other, and neither takes offense to it, because we know who the other person is, and we're friends, and there is sort of a kidding that goes on, and I don't know whether that comes through all the time. Sometimes the things I say to you are very much just kind of tongue in cheek, and I think it's kind of the same back to me. And I think we recognize that there's more to it than sort of the simplification. I mean, again, Mike likes to, my identification, I think, on the website indicates that I spend my time again crushing the little guy, which is not entirely true, but so, I hope our listeners take that sort of in the spirit that we do. I don't get offended, nor do I search for offense in things that Mike says to me. And really, the whole reason we do this show is to get kind of two differing views. So
yeah, and I think both of us tend to have pretty thick skins when it comes to that. Like you said, it takes a lot for us to feel personally offended, but people react differently to these things. And so I think you're right. So much of what we do on this show, it is just a conversation between two old friends. And you're right that maybe there are things that you and I think are perfectly fine because we know each other that other listeners aren't aware because they don't have that history, obviously. And certainly I just wanted to stress that you
should hear how we talk to each other off the air.
Oh my God. Yeah. But anyway, I never intend to give unnecessary offense to anyone. I mean, I will call out neo-Nazis and things like that, but I don't intend to be snide or dismissive to any legitimate, reasonable view. And if that came across to any listeners, I'm sorry about that. So, but I think it's an interesting lead in to what we're going to be talking about today, because this week, Jay and I thought we'd try something a little different for our Wednesday show. We both looked at the same 4 articles on political correctness and identity politics. And obviously, this is something that comes up, all the time, right? In a variety of contexts these days. And now we've talked about this indirectly in the past as it relates to other issues, but we thought it would be worthwhile to talk about political correctness and identity politics in a more direct way. I mean, considering how much it does seem to color so much of our politics. And those of you who follow us on Facebook and Twitter may have seen links I posted to these articles a few days ago, because I thought it might be a good idea to pass them along so that you could read the same things that Jay and I read prior to our discussion, so that we'd all be on the same page. And we thought maybe if you like this, we could make it sort of a regular kind of thing, and it'd be a way for you to be able to kind of take greater part in our discussions and so forth, and just thought it'd be an interesting experiment. So you ready to go, Jay? Okay, well, actually, before we do get started, I should say we do have 2 sponsors today. We want to thank our first sponsor today, our first sponsor today. I can speak. Okay. That is ZipRecruiter. So, Jay, did I ever tell you about my first real life job, the one I got after I briefly dropped out of Baldwin Wallace College, our alma mater, after my initial semester that was, let's say, far too heavy on the partying and far too light on actually, going to class?
I did not hear about it. I'm surprised I haven't. Or maybe I have, and just it escapes me now.
It's been a while, but anyway, I was a car washer delivery guy / gopher at a car dealership, and let me tell you, I was not a good fit for that job. I only got it because they needed someone, and a guy I knew who worked there recommended me. It was pretty much a disaster, right? But of course, this was back in those pre-internet days when finding good help was a lot harder than it is now. But even now, good help is still awfully hard to find, and that's where ZipRecruiter comes in. Whether you're looking for a car washer, which, by the way, there are 59 listings for car washers in Cincinnati alone on ZipRecruiter, I just checked, or an executive assistant, a programmer, or whatever, ZipRecruiter can help you find the great fit for your job opening. And with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with just one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right person to your job better than anyone else. And that's why ZipRecruiter is different, because unlike those other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you, it finds them. In fact, over 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within 1 day. There's no juggling emails or calls to your office. You just screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Don't end up hiring someone like me. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. Right now, Politics Guys listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy. That's ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy. One more time, ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy to post jobs for free. All right, so here we go, Jay. So I thought we'd start with political correctness. The article I posted about this featured a linguist who says that the basic idea of political correctness is that we should try to avoid language or behavior that offends or marginalizes certain groups. But because that term, political correctness, includes the term correctness, it carries this implication of judgment and moral superiority, kind of this diktat of proper behavior that's passed down by the cultural elites that regular people must obey or be branded as evil, bad, closed-minded, or racist. And she argues that the right has sort of folded this into their anti-elite rhetoric and kind of painting it as this ridiculous obsession that liberal elites and their fellow travelers in the mainstream media indulge in. And in the end, she says, really, what this is a branding issue, and that what we really need is a new term. What do you think, Jay? Okay, well, there you go.
Well, first of all, I think she gave away the game in the first line of the article where she says that the term political correct. Now, going back, the term political correctness, this started, I'd say that term in or about, I guess, the mid 80s. And it was sort of derisively termed political correctness by a lot of those on the right and just regular people, because it had all the reminders and hallmarks of the Soviet old style, where people would be called out and dismissed or sent to Siberia for holding opinions or saying things that were politically incorrect. That was the term. But it now seems that the left is she's happy to embrace that term. And look, to the extent that someone wants to make an argument that there is just plain good manners and you ought not to say things that would offend others unnecessarily, I think that's great. But the friction that you run into, and in the place it started most was at college campuses and continues now, is when this idea of, well, I don't want to cause offense, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings, is used as sort of a cudgel to keep one from voicing an opinion. For example, if I'm to say, listen, I think affirmative action is a horrible policy. I think it's a disservice to those it seeks to serve, and I think it's unfair to the rest of the country, and it's bad for race relations altogether. If I were to say that on many college campuses these days, I would be branded a racist. That would be called hate speech. One could be sent to the dean's office. That is a sort of a violation of speech codes, all that sort of thing. And we've lived in this world now for about 30 some years, and a lot of it's sort of filtered out from the academy to the wider world. And I think part of that is the Trump election, where there's this pushback. And again, you can say, well, I'll stop topic and let you answer. But to me, her thesis that political correctness as it exists is merely an attempt to everybody be nice to each other, I think that's really misstating it. And I think that to say that there's not some interest in trying to gain political power through control of speech is pretty naive.
Okay. Well, I have definitely have some thoughts on that. But before I get to those, we want to thank our second sponsor today, Casper. What are you sleeping on these days? I don't know. For a long time, my wife and I, like a lot of people, I think, had this standard issue mattress store thing that we got after, kind of trekking out, dealing with a way too intrusive salesperson. And in the end, not being all that crazy about what we were sleeping on, but not too long ago, I realized that our mattress had to go. It was in bad shape. And so I did, like I do, a lot of obsessive research online. And in the end, I concluded that Casper was the smartest choice for us. It was quick and easy to order it. And now we've got literally the best mattress we've ever slept on. And, just a few days ago, my wife said to me that it's weird, but lately she'd been feeling a lot better with a lot fewer aches and pains than usual. And she realized that this started to happen, well, not too long after we started sleeping on our Casper mattress. Seriously, it was totally unsolicited. And so far I thought, well, that's great. I should definitely mention that when we talk about Casper next time. Now, Jay, you also got some big Casper fans in your family as well, right?
I have, family. My sister and my mom both have Casper mattresses, and also both swear by them. And the delivery, the setup, the convenience of Casper mattress, as opposed to, as you said, the trekking out to the mattress store, is just fantastic. So that's also they praise the quality and also the convenience of Casper mattress.
And one of the things I love, technology. It's loaded with technology, man. Let me tell you, they got engineers doing stuff, and they've got this combination of this is the supportive memory foams, and you get just that right amount of sink, just that right amount of bounce, and also, and I mentioned this before, but this is really important to me. It's designed to be breathable, which means sleep's cool. And especially when you're sleeping on a bed with another person and a dog, because Gus now is sleeping on the mattress, well, that's particularly important. And so, you can trust Jay, you can trust me about how great a Casper mattress is, but you don't have to, because Casper has over 20,000 reviews with an average of 4.8 stars. Plus, you get free shipping to the U.S. and Canada and a 100-night risk-free deal. So, hey, try it out. If you don't love it, they'll pick it up and refund you everything. Plus, it's designed, developed, and assembled in the USA. And best of all, Positive listeners get $50 toward any mattress purchase by going to casper.com/TPG and using promo code TPG. That's casper.com/TPG, promo code TPG. Terms and conditions apply. All right. So, Jay, I hear what you're saying, and I do agree that there are some people on the left who embrace the correctness part of it. political correctness and who say that no, there is a correct way to speak and do try to and are, I think, regrettably close-minded.
No, I'll agree with you. I think there is a correct way. I think, yeah, civility is great. I'm all for it. But the point, and I think I probably made it badly, was there are some on the left who see this as a power move.
No, yeah, I agree.
To be able to control language. Yeah.
I think you made it well, actually. And unfortunately, while I think that is a minority of people on the left, those are the people who speak the loudest and we hear from the most. They're the sort of people who shut down Charles Murray at Millbury College, right? Those are the people who get the press coverage. And it's a shame. And I think it essentially gives cover to people who don't behave in a decent fashion, because I think most reasonable people, all reasonable people can agree that in political discourse, in discourse in general, there's something that we should respect called, well, it used to be called common decency, or not being a jackass, or acting like a gentleman. And I mean this in the kind of 19th century Victorian sense of the term, because I'm really into that kind of 19th century Victorian literature and so forth. And this is a really important concept to them. This idea of always trying to, well, make people feel comfortable, to go out of your way to not make people feel ill at ease. And I think that's really important. That's critical, I would say, to civil discourse. That doesn't mean you don't call out people when they're acting improperly, but it means you're not an ass, essentially. And I think the problem with political correctness and how some people on the far reaches of the left use it is it allows people like, unfortunately, President Trump and Steve Bannon and other folks to basically say, well, to be, in a sense, to not respect common decency, because say, well, that's all just political correctness. And I think we need to make a distinction between those people on the left who shouldn't be, trying to muzzle speech that they don't agree with, and those people who are just saying, listen, let's be decent to each other. And I think that's something that we all should be able to agree on, right?
Right. No, I think that's right. The other piece though that goes with this, that the ethos of we ought to be gentlemanly. And again, that's not to exclude any non-gentleman listeners. But there's another side of that goes with democracy and with our First Amendment, and that is, while you ought to be gentlemanly, you have a constitutional right to be a jackass. You don't, there's no compulsion, and there ought not to be a compulsion by any sort of governmental power, that would include a state university, to say how you ought to speak or not speak. I mean, those rules ought to be, again, sort of litigated in just the rest of civility in society, and the punishment that you reap is that of being thought of as a jackass.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that the sort of social norms and I think in many cases religious norms and traditions and customs that used to be sort of a push back against this in a very strong way, that kind of behavior that people certainly constitutionally had a right to engage in, those have diminished considerably, I think. And now, in fact, that sort of behavior is trumpeted and rewarded in many ways. And so I think that's, part of the reason why our political discourse has become so crass and debased. And that's something I really regret. And I think you do too.
And I want to have one more other point too, going to the article that the first article we talked about. And that is, she sort of mocks conservatives when they use words saying, "Oh, they're afraid to say something," or they're concerned about it. But again, I'm thinking back on my college experience, and there were times where I was sort of active in campus politics, and as were you, and voicing opinions that weren't always sort of popular. But there was a concern at times of listen, if you voice opinion that is unpopular to the administration, and when I say unpopular, I mean something that is a conservative opinion, like I think affirmative action is a crummy policy, that official action could be taken against you. Likewise, students who might oppose same-sex marriage, it's not just a matter of, hey, you disagree with me. It's, hey, you disagree with me, and that's hate speech, and you need to either be re-educated or punished by some official entity. And again, I'm not talking about people just thinking you're a jerk, because I'm completely, that's very much the conservative Burkean way that you run a society.
Exactly. No, I'm all for that. Yeah.
It's the,
don't punish people officially, ostracize
sort of
them.
stepping in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think we're kind of a one mind on this, really. So, well, that's always nice. So, but let's move on to the articles that focused more on identity politics. One that I wanted to kind of start with, called "The Liberal Crack Up," which is by Mark Lilla, who's a liberals humanity professor, who he basically argues that liberalism used to be about bringing people together in solidarity. Think kind of New Deal, FDR type liberalism, but now our sort of increasingly individualistic culture has really created, I'd say, several generations of people who have difficulty thinking in terms of the common good, but instead sort of perceive most everything through the kind of solipsistic lens of individual personal identity. And so by this reasoning, if you're not, say, a black man, you basically have less right, or even no right, to have a view on issues that affect black men. And identity is essentially, in this case, seen as authority. And Lil argues that elite universities have really pushed this view to the great detriment of traditional liberal policies and politics, because millions of Americans feel repelled by this kind of individualist, narcissistic sort of identity politics. So would you say that's a fair summary, Jay? And if so, yeah. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think I picked that article as one of my, one of my reading a couple weeks ago. Karl Marx is rolling in his grave. It used to be at the class warfare, man.
And this is written by, like I said, written by a liberal. Yeah. So yeah, I felt a lot of this resonated, and I really think that this is similar to the point made in a much more abbreviated fashion in the Baker and Young article that we also read, though. One thing that they add in that Lilla doesn't really address is the role that social media has played in all this, though. I mean, they only give it a line or two, though I'd argue that it deserves a lot more attention.
Yeah. The piece that the former one about the liberal crack up, in that he also mentions, and I said this before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. He says, some of my students on the left will say something that they'll say, well, as a, whatever person of color, as a transgendered person, as a whatever, here's what the view ought to be. And he contrasts that with his conservative students who view things more just on principle. And I think that's something important. That this is so often why we're talking past each other. I'm not going to make the big blanket argument that conservatives are more principled. But the ideas of conservatism are essentially that, look, these principles are the same for everyone, no matter your race, gender, identity, and so forth. So it's not this, everything is relative and everyone has their own truth and so forth. Then again, that's maybe digging kind of philosophically deeper than we ought to on a Wednesday afternoon podcast.
No, I don't think
you
so.
Get my meaning.
Yeah, I don't think so. In fact, I think that's exactly the argument that Lil is making, saying that liberalism used to be much more along those lines back in the day, and that certain groups, for various reasons, I mean, I think there's a lot behind it, have abandoned that whole notion of, or not entirely abandon it, but are much more focused on kind of that, what I would think is fair to call sort of a narcissistic, sort of individualistic focus, and forgetting kind of that common good, that idea that we're all Americans and that we all deserve equal treatment and that sort of thing. And I do think that that's something that maybe has been gotten away from in some elements on the left. So I agree with Lil. I agree with you on that, actually.
Well, and something that we can also, we talked on the Sunday show about DACA, and that was something where we probably agree on the ultimate policy anyway, but let's assume we didn't agree on the ultimate policy. We still agreed on the principle that this was a constitutional issue that ought to be handled by Congress rather than the president. And to me, there's also so much of that in that when conservatives make the process argument, so to speak, of look, it's not that I'm necessarily opposed to gay marriage. It's that I'm opposed to the Supreme Court finding a new right within the Constitution. It's not that I'm opposed to dreamers. It's I'm opposed to the executive acting in excess of his constitutional authority. And those arguments are so often portrayed as you pointed out, well, you must hate these people. And that's sort of the, again, the trap that identity politics leads us into.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, and I think that's because there's a lack of appreciation for how important it is to abide by the rules that have been set down, even if they don't lead to the outcome you want. So just because you think something is fair or not doesn't mean you can throw out the rules in this instance, because that way kind of chaos, leads to chaos essentially. And
right, or you're just sort of arguing over which dictator you prefer.
Yeah. So I think we not surprising to me, we agree very much on that. I also think, when you agree that social media has done a lot to encourage this sort of behavior?
Yes and no. I'm
Okay.
not so much concerned with the social media. The social media, I think, has raised the volume on it. But I think it's more been, and I'll go ahead and use the words campus indoctrination. That kids coming out of college have been taught that, look, it's okay to think this way, and you ought to think this way, and you ought to identify first as whatever your color, gender, whatever, as opposed to, hey, I'm an American from here or there. I think that's those seeds are sown there, and then they just sort of expand on social media.
Well, I guess I would say
that's my take. You're probably closer to it than I am working in academia.
I would say as a college professor that I would think that you overestimate the impact and influence of college professors on students, but in general, but I also think that the reason why I think social media is such an important part of this is that I see how tied in students are to it, sometimes even when I'm trying to talk to them. But I really think it sort of brings home that point to them that we are this community, and this little community, reinforces the one view of the right and so forth. And I mean, what is correct in that sense. And so I really think it's been a big part of that. I mean, there were other aspects that were kind of leading to that, pushing in that direction anyway, but I think
there's a magnification and an organization that social media provides that allows political correct speech or political correct attacks on someone other, or racial identity attacks, so to speak, to blossom. For example, I'm thinking of when you have, for example, a company that does something or other that is seen as insensitive, the Coke commercial with the protesters, for example. And you will have this social media explosion of people who are offended by this because they feel it's racist, or it's appropriating the Black Lives Matter movement, or what have you. The people at Coke just want to sell you Coke. And sort of they get this, the social media allows this thing to blossom and bloom, and then they say, okay, forget it, because who needs this kind of trouble? And I think it sort of adds voices to those people in our society who are seeking to be offended. And as I talked earlier, when we were talking strictly political correctness, it's political power, and if you are seeking to be offended, you'll be able to, and this is a good way then to voice that. And I think so often companies will cave now just because it's easier to cave than to fight.
No, absolutely. And, I think this is not something that is exclusive to the left.
Or I shouldn't say it's easier to cave than the fight. It's easy to cave rather than, look, all right, we're not going to fight over one stupid, Kardashian commercial. So
no, it's not that it's easier. I would say the word is that it's better for the bottom line to cave
exactly.
the fight.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not trying to win moral victories here. Like you said, they're just trying to sell you more.
Exactly. We're just trying to sell
keep the share price up. Yeah. So, but this is something that's not exclusive to the left. As David Brooks pointed out in our final article, how Trump kills the GOP. He said, this is something we see on the right. He argues that since 2005, the Republican Party has become what he calls a vehicle for white identity politics. And in fact, he finds, he looks at a lot of polling data, and he finds an interesting distinction between what he calls conservative universalists and conservative white identitarians. And basically, he says the conservative universalists are people, like Jay, who would say that there are these principles and they apply to everyone. And then there are the conservative white identitarians who say man, white people are getting the shaft, and we need a politics that stands up specifically for white people, basically. And he says, there's a roughly, according to the data he's looked at, roughly 47% of Republicans are what you might call universalists, and maybe around 40% are conservative white identitarians. And the interesting argument he makes is about these white identitarians. He says they've essentially taken the sort of multiculturalism that's been kind of pushed in society, in schools and other places and so forth, and in the wider culture, and it's sort of turned it on its head, applied it to themselves in a way, and said, "Hey, wait, we're an oppressed, well, not in the minority exactly yet, but soon to be minority," and use the same sort of tools and methods, basically, as other groups have used on the left, basically. And so,
I would say to some extent they are maybe a minority if you look beyond just talking about race and talk about race, class, economics, and so forth.
Yeah, but that's the point, isn't it? Right? Because if you split us up into small enough categories, everyone's a minority, right? And that's the problem, right? And that's what it seems like on the left and right. I think reasonable folks are saying is that this is what ends up being really bad, is that we're so unused to thinking of ourselves as Americans who have some differences of opinions, as opposed to a member of this group who sees all these enemies around us who are trying to take our share of the pie.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to look at this as maybe, because I think maybe I see things maybe a little more in a Machiavellian sense than you do. Like I said, I think this whole, the idea of political correctness, identity politics, it is about power more than it is about trying to be sensitive. And these white nationalists, or white identitarians, as he calls them, see this as a way to grab some power. The power that they get is sort of solidifying those around them. And again, this is the first time. I don't know. I shouldn't say it's the first time. It's hardly the first time. First time in modern memory that you've had this sort of a white identitarian blossoming. And again, I think Brooks probably overestimates it. We can talk about the polling data. Sometimes I think I might call these people traditionalists, whether as opposed to white identitarians. But I take the point. And I think, again, they're doing this because they see it as this is a way to grab power. And so often in our society, the way to political power is to portray yourself as a victim.
Yeah. And, we've talked about this before, at least I've mentioned it before, that this certainly makes sense, because I think no reasonable person can deny that for a long, long time, white males in the United States had really unfair advantages, and there was a lot of systemic bias and racism and sexism and so forth. Now, we've gotten a lot better. I think we can differ in terms of how far we still need to go, but there's no question that as if you're especially an older white male, and you all of a sudden see the extent of your privilege changing for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, that is a loss that you're perceiving. And that, of course, is going to result in some sort of a reaction from you. And so I certainly understand why it's happening, and it makes sense that it's happening at this point in time, I think.
Yeah. I think we should also point out that the idea of identity politics isn't really new. Maybe the way it's happening is new. I mean, Bismarck said, I think it was Bismarck, that politics is the ordering of hatreds. I think I screwed that up. I didn't say that the way I wanted to. But you know what I mean, Mike,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
You know the Bismarck quote I'm talking about.
I certainly do.
That's the way politics has always been done, is you look at what group doesn't like some other group, and you play off that. Now, again, it could have been in the past business and labor, and there were plenty of ethnic divisions throughout Europe that I think Bismarck was referring to also. But the United States, we've always had at least the opportunity to do something different, in that this country wasn't founded on, hey, here's one ethnic tribe, and here's where we happen to live, so this is our country. Rather, it was a nation that was founded sort of on principles. rather than ethnicity. And I think that's a real concern to me, is that the farther we get from that founding on principle and more to, hey, everyone is just in it for their own ethnic group, the farther we get from what America ought to be.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with that 100%. But of course, there are elements obviously on the right who say, well, yes and no. Certainly, it was founded on principles, but it was founded by Western Europeans working from a Judeo-Christian tradition. And so therefore, that is equally a fundamental part of America, and you cannot take that away and still have America. Now, I totally disagree with that, but I think that's where they're coming from.
Right. Well, I mean, historically, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, that's,
Right, but I think they take it one step further by saying that, well, if you're not a Judeo-Christian white American,
they identify that also with a race. They identify it with it is part of being white. It's not just simply the whole Anglo-American legal tradition is good because it's good. It's good because it's white.
Yeah, and so if you're a
right, I mean that's what you're trying to.
Yeah. If you're a black Muslim, then you're somehow, even if you're technically an American, you're a lesser American kind of thing. And I think you and I both agree that that's just simply wrong-headed and destructive kind of thinking.
Right.
All right.
One more thing that I just want to throw out there, but we should go back to the political correctness, because I meant to mention this earlier. When we're going to have this discussion, I was trying to think of the most silly and ridiculous politically correct abuses that have happened recently, and the one that occurred to me, and I don't know whether you followed this, and is the sportscaster Robert Lee, who is a gentleman who works for ESPN and a gentleman of Asian descent, but was set to do the call the play-by-play for the UVA game, and I'm not even sure who they're playing, a week or so ago, and ESPN said they had to reassign him to a different game out of concerns of political correctness, and again on some basis that the Asian sportscaster Robert Lee would be confused with the Confederate general Robert E. Lee, and again that's the sort of thing that to conservatives you just kind of it boggles your mind, and you realize this is just silly. Now, I don't know, maybe Mr. Lee may have gotten to see a better game anyway. I don't know, but again, if you happen to be in his position and your boss says, well, we're not going to send you on this job, well, why not? Well, because your name is Robert Lee, and well, the same as the Confederate general, you can't do it. I mean, again, you get to this ridiculousness, and sometimes when you get to that ridiculousness, I think it undercuts the whole enterprise of if you want to say this is about being civil and just being nice to one another.
Sure. No, though I don't think that was really a case of ESPN being uber politically correct. I think it was just them saying, hey, you know what? There might be some people who have an issue with this, and let's just not. I mean, we have plenty of announcers who can do this game, so let's just try to avoid the issue entirely, because just like Coke wants to, just really only cares about selling you more Coke, ESPN only really cares about trying to keep their ratings up,
getting people to watch
exactly
the game.
So they thought they were just trying to.
You might have had even a bigger audience if they said Robert E. Lee is going to call the game. I mean, people would really have tuned in. But to me that's what's the worst part of political correctness is it takes out a little bit of the diversity and sort of the flavor of our country, and that everyone's a little afraid of geez, if we do this, oh my gosh, is it going to blow up? And that's that chilling effect. Whether it's on political speech about, hey, I want to talk about affirmative action, or it's just something dumb like a football game, not dumb, but let's say non-political like a football game or a Coke commercial.
Sure. No, absolutely. You and I have
that takes away from the richness of our discussion. I think when people are like, oh, I don't know if we can do that.
Yeah. Well, I think both you and I are big fans of the First Amendment, and it's first for a reason, and this is an issue that we've agreed on for a long time, and we both kind of, I think, lament the sort of ridiculous lengths to which political correctness can get to at times, for sure. So, all right. Well, this was something new for us, and we'd really appreciate hearing what you think, regardless of whether you loved it, hated it, or maybe think it has potential if we make some changes. I don't know. But be sure.
Or if you think Mike was snide.
Yeah, if exactly, so I won't apologize in advance because that seems wrong. It'd be, but anyway, so, but please, we really like to hear, especially whenever we try something new like this. You can email us at mail@politicsguys.com or comment in the comments section for this episode on politicsguys.com or comment on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/politicsguys page. And even if you follow us on Twitter, you can also send us a direct message with your thoughts. So that does it for this experimental episode. Thanks everyone for listening. We hope you liked what you heard. And I'd like to check out today's sponsor, ZipRecruiter. Politics Guys listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter. I can speak for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy and Casper, where Politics Guys listeners get $50 toward any mattress purchase by going to Casper.com/TPG and using promo code TPG. And, listener support really is a big help to us. We really appreciate it. And if you are interested in joining our great group of supporters, you can go to politicsguys.com and click on the Patreon link. And to support us without spending anything, it would be great if you could share this episode with your friends and followers or pass along our new show posts and tweets on Facebook and Twitter. And leaving reviews and ratings on iTunes also helps. The executive producers of the Politics Guys are Michael Baranowski, Jay Carson, Trey Orndorff, and Bruce Johnson. The show is produced by Michael Baranowski. We'll be back with a new show on Saturday. We hope you'll join us.